Recording, and let's go live. Alrighty. Okay, so we're trying to get through the more simple stuff in programming. By the way, who here has like previous programming language knowledge? Anyone? Either JavaScript or maybe a different programming language. If you have experience with a different programming language besides JavaScript, I'm just gonna assume you know more programming than me because I just assume JavaScript is the easiest. Visual Basic counts, yeah, why not? I think that's an old one though, right? Hello, Mizuki. Mm, so let me open up Visual Studio Code and let's open the folder that we were working on yesterday. It was called Short Stories on my desktop. Short story, not stories, short story. And let's look at what the code looks like so far. So, we're working with the most basics of programming, and I wonder if I could. I don't know. I'm just tempted to open up Adobe Illustrator to try to show things. I don't know if it helps or it makes it more confusing, but I'm gonna open up Illustrator, try to illustrate what variables are. There's Illustrator. Okay. So basically, we have where's all my stuff? Reset. Okay, um, so variables. We're covering variables because this is the most basic unit of storage for data in any programming language, not just JavaScript. So a variable is just a container for something. Um, so think of it like a box, and you give that variable some sort of name to identify it, right? Like my var. This is my variable, and it's going to contain some sort of data inside. So that data could be a string, just a whole bunch of text information. It could be a number, right? And these are different data types. So numbers and strings are different data types. They're both primitives. Remember, there's primitive data, which is like just basic data. And then there's non-primitives or objects. So it's pretty much just primitives and objects. So the primitives are numbers, string, and I should maybe wrap this with quotes to remind you that strings are always wrapped in quotes, single or double. Let's maybe make that less text in there and increase the font size. Let's call this myvar1, myvar2. Ah, Carol is here. Good evening, Carol. I'm just reviewing some of the basic data types, so you're just in time. Login code is red. Welcome. Okay, so let me label this number. So you have numbers, you have strings, you say number and string. These are the different data types, and then we have, let's say, true and false, which is called a boolean. What else? We have null, which is just empty value. What else? We have also undefined. If you did not define something, it's just going to be undefined. I think we also had a couple other ones, symbols. These were symbols, and I'm not sure if big int counts as a primitive, but big int and symbol, these are ES 6 edition, so they were introduced in 2015. Let me just open up the notes so we could review that. Wrong folder, 154, JavaScript notes. Remember, I gave you these notes so you guys can open them up and look at this as well. Let me just go back to the part about big int and anyways, here we're talking about all the different primitives. So we have primitive. There's 6 primitive data types: string, number, boolean, null, undefined, and symbol. So I didn't mention big int in here. I don't know. Maybe big int is not a primitive. It should be though. I don't see why it wouldn't be. So symbols is again something new. It's just supposed to represent like a unique value. So you rarely use those. And big int is supposed to be able to represent large numbers that you can't calculate normally accurately. I don't know too much about big int, so we're not going to talk about these two too much. Okay, but the more common ones, undefined is not something you're ever going to define yourself. Something is undefined if you try to use it and it doesn't exist. So let's say inspect. So I just type in like apple and press enter. Oh, wait, why is it auto correcting me? Okay, let's say my var and then press enter. And we see uncaught reference, my var is not defined. So basically my var is undefined. If I say let my var, now I've defined it, or I've created my var, but I haven't given it any value, so it's undefined by default. Okay, so I guess not defined is not the same as undefined. Not defined gives you an error, but if you define or you create a variable, you just don't put anything inside of it, kind of like this one. I guess this would be undefined, not null, because we're creating a variable. I'm just calling it my var2, but I'm not putting anything inside it, right? If I say let my var2, and I type my var2, it's undefined. I didn't give it any value. I can always define it later. Remember, you can say my var2 equals 23. Now if I type my var2, it's no longer undefined. Now it's 23. So it was undefined, and then I just put a number in it. So now it's no longer undefined. Now it's a number. Okay, so other programming languages might have different data types for different types of numbers. In JavaScript, they're all number. Everything that's a number is a number. But in like something like C+ or Java, you might get different types for different data types for numbers. You might have integer for just a regular number. If you have something like this that has a point, then it would be considered like a float. Anyways, but we don't have to worry about that because it's JavaScript, so everything is just number. Doesn't matter if it's 23 or 23.45, it's still a number, okay? So what we did in the first assignment, or what I asked you to do, is write some kind of a story that can have some names or any word in there that's repeated multiple times that you might reuse throughout the story. Turn it into a variable. So, and I know that it's kind of annoying using the plus sign, but luckily there's another way to do this, which I'll show you, I guess, right now. But just to make it clear, the plus sign is for concatenation, okay? So concatenation, concatenation, spelled that wrong. Concatenation. So that just means taking two things and putting it together, like hell and low. So if you use the plus sign, let's say let x equal that, and let y equal that. And if we say let z equal x plus y, then z equals hello, because we concatenated these, we put them together like that. I mean, you don't have to make them a variable. This would also work if you just said, oops, delete that, delete that, delete that, delete that. So if you say, let z equal l plus plus low, then z is equal to hello. By the way, if this, remember, this is comparison. This is saying, is z equal to hello? Yes, it is. z is equal to hello is assigning z the value of hello. But I'm just trying to demonstrate here that z is now hello after typing let z equals hel plus lo. So we're concatenating throughout the story. We have let main character equal Dennis, let animal equal monster, and then let story equal one day a person named, and then I put a space here, plus main character went exploring in the jungle. So let's copy this and see what this looks like here. So if I put it on one line, let's just say exploring to make it shorter. So one day a person named, and notice this is in quotes. I'm gonna make all the strings in this blue color. So if it's blue, it's a string. Actually, let's make sure the quotes are also blue. And if it's red, it's a variable. One day a person named main character. And remember, I defined main character. I said main character, or let main character equal like Bob. So if I say let main character equal Bob, then it's one day a person named, and there's a space here, plus main character went exploring, gives you one day a person named Bob went exploring. If I didn't put a space here, and I didn't put a space here, I forget to put those spaces, then we're gonna get one day a person named Bob went, like, and this is all gonna be one word, because when you concatenate, it's just basically gonna stick these two sentences together. It's gonna take this one, I don't know why I'm getting these little boxes, copy, paste, there we go, and copy, paste. So when we concatenate with the plus sign, we're basically taking the word Bob also. So I should maybe type in Bob here. Bob. So when we concatenate these, we're basically just sticking them together like this. Alright? So if you want there to be a space, you need to include that space. Or else it's just gonna stick them together. Okay, so I don't know, that should be pretty clear, right? But now let me show you another way to do this without the plus sign. Okay, and this was introduced in ES6. It's called template strings. So the way you could write it, the alternative way we could do it is using backticks. So here's the rules with these backticks. So instead of concatenating with the plus sign, you can use backtick. That's the one on top of the tab button on your keyboard next to the number 1. It's a backward quote basically. If you use these, you can say that same. Let me bring it back for a second. So instead of having to do this with template literals, you just need to change this to the backtick and change this one to a backtick. Oops. Backtick, okay. So once you use that, you no longer need to put the plus signs. All you need to do is you write the whole quote like this, with just with the backticks, except for the variable main character. Remember, this is a variable; it's not a string. So for that one, you need to wrap it with, sorry, not parentheses, curly brackets, and then put a dollar sign in front of it. So that's all you have to do to get that to work. So imagine, so it's, you can see it's a little bit easier to write this way. Just anytime you have a variable in the string, first of all, start the string with backticks. Don't use single quote or double quote. Use a backtick. And then any variable that you're gonna have inside there, just wrap it in curly brackets and put a dollar sign in front of it, and it will concatenate it just like that one. So it's nicer that way because you don't have to like put a space and then plus main character plus space. Like, it's less things to worry about, right? So if I was gonna convert this whole thing into template literals, I would just need to do this. Let me just retype it. Actually, I'll just change this one. So first of all, this would be a backtick. We don't need this anymore. So I'm just gonna get rid of all the quotes in here and the plus signs. No more quotes and plus signs. And then just the first and the last quote will become backticks. And let's bring these all in. Let me turn on view word wrap. Okay, so it doesn't stretch far. Okay, so now I'm gonna read through it again. One day, a person named main character. Let's get rid of that plus. So main character. This is a variable, so let's wrap it with the curly brackets and a dollar sign. You could see now it changed color. So one day, a person named main character went exploring in the jungle. When he stopped to take a picture, and an animal is also a variable, so we're gonna put dollar sign and wrap that in curly brackets. Showed up in his shot. Main character, again, variable here, so main character, in other words, Dennis in this situation. Dennis was terrified and dropped his camera. That's when the, whatever the animal is, monster, that's when the monster charged at him. That was the end of main character, or Dennis. If I save this, it should work just the same as before. You can see here, one day a person named Dennis went exploring in the jungle. When he stopped to take a picture, a monster showed up in the shot. Blah blah blah. I have some line breaks here. That's because I pressed enter. So another thing about these template literals, it looks like you will, um, if you like press enter a bunch of times, save this. when you're using template literals, it will literally include all those spaces. So that's also different. If it was a regular string, I don't know if it would do the same thing. Let's try a regular string now. I'm just curious if I had a regular string here and I added some lorem. I don't know if I could. Nope, I can't do that here. It's not HTML. Let's just type in hello, comma, bunch of space, world. Well, this will be included because it's wrapped in quotes. So this will still be a big space. But what about if I press enter? Oh no, see if we press enter, then it thinks that's the end of the line. It's looking for a closing quote. Yeah, so yeah, you can't do that there. Here you can though. Press enter, doesn't turn red, give me an error. Right, so that's a lot easier to write it this way, right? Less I don't know, it's simpler. You just put a dollar sign and curly brackets and wrap the variable instead of concatenating with the plus sign. No more need for that and opening and closing the quote just to do that. So pretty cool addition in ES6. Sorry, what's the shortcut for what? For curly brackets? If you highlight in VS Code and you highlight a word in VS Code um and press Shift curly bracket, it'll just wrap it. So try it. Highlight a word and then Shift curly bracket, or Shift and bracket to get the curly bracket. It'll wrap it for you. It only works in VS Code though. It wouldn't work like for example here. If I do the same thing, highlight it and press Shift curly bracket, then it just puts a curly bracket and deletes the word. But it works in VS Code. Welcome. There's a bunch of other shortcuts in VS Code that I don't really use often, but they're pretty useful. Like for example, like instead of like say you want to create a div with the class of I don't know, container. Like normally I would write div class equals container and then close it. Shortcut to it is if you just do a div dot container and then press enter and you see it just does it for you. I always forget, I don't know. I know it's there. I just I don't use it often. Even though I should. It just makes it easier. It's because I usually create elements without the class first. I add the class later. But yeah, like h2 dot I don't know, main title, press enter, it gives you an h2 with the class of main title. Or type section hashtag top and press enter, it gives you a section with an ID of top. So some useful HTML shortcuts there. Cool. So any questions, or should I move on to non-primitives? Because we talked about the primitives enough. Maybe I don't know. Maybe practice doing some math first with the numbers, and then let's practice with booleans. comparing things. Let's go here into the console. I really wish I could hide this top part. It's really annoying. I wonder if I could. Oh, look, we could do this. That doesn't help, does it? What about this? What else do we have? We have the pop-up. You could have the console pop up even, or pop out, but it still has this top part. I don't know how to hide that part. Oh, okay, you just have to click that button. Okay, I don't know why I didn't figure that out sooner. So console, and let's click that button. There we go. Now we could focus more on the console without that annoying thing on the top. Okay, so just click the little gear to make that go away. So in the browser console, let's practice with some of the primitives that we learned about. So we know strings already. You can write a string. Let's say let my string equal hello world. You can write it like that. Say my string 1. We can say let my string 2 equal hello world with single quotes. We can write it that way. And my string 1 and my string 2, they're both going to be strings. And you can see like the console chooses to print them out with the single quote, even though I wrote this one with double quote, this one with single quote. Still, it just decides to show you with the single quote. Let's clear that. You can also use backticks. So let string 3, my string 3 equal hi world with the backticks, my string 3. You can see again, it chooses to do the regular single quote. And if you ever need to say a quote inside of a quote, or if you need to use an apostrophe, if you're using single quotes, remember there's the escape character. So if I say let quote equal, let's call it my string 4. Say let my string 4 equal, she said hello. So on the outside I have double quotes, on the inside I have single quotes. My string 4, she said hello. Now we could also, if we decided to write it a little bit different, we could say let my string 5 equal, so I'm using single quote on the outside. She said hello. Now you can see it's, now what's the problem now is I'm using single quotes everywhere, so it's thinking this is one string, this is a variable, and then there's some empty string instead of one whole string. So what you can do if you're gonna use the same type of quote, just put a backslash in front of in front of it. Accidentally pressed enter. Let me bring that up again. By the way, pressing up in the console shows you like something that you just typed in earlier. So when I press up, it shows me my previous lines of code. So let my string 5 equal she said hello. So we just need to put a backslash in front of the quote. Put one in front of that one as well. So putting this in front of a quote basically makes sure that you're kind of saying don't end the quote here. This is just a character part of the string. So this backslash in front of it is the escape character. You need to put that there. So once I have that and I press enter, I type my string 5. You can see she said hello. And then the console decides to put double quotes on the outside even though I put single. Just because it has to show me in its own way. Okay, and then numbers. You have numbers. Let my num equal 5. Let my num2 equal 5. Now, this one is not a number technically because I put quotes around it. So technically, my num2 is a string, not a number. This one's a number. This one's a string. So if I say my num, we get 5. If I say my num2, we get 5 with quotes around it. So they're clearly different. But if you do any addition on this, it will automatically convert this to a number. So if I say my num plus my num2, oh no, it didn't actually convert it to, it did the opposite. Instead of converting this to a number, it converted this to a string. So I did 5 plus 5, but instead of giving me 10, it gave me 55. It concatenated them because one of them was a string. Might be different though if I do my num times my num. Let me see. Then we get 25. So if you multiply it, then it converts it to a number. So that's something that you should, I guess, consider. If I multiply a number with a string, it will give me a number. If I add, it will just concatenate them. It'll stick them next to each other. And also, you can compare my num is equal to 5. True. My num is equal to 5. True. Is my num equal? So remember, the triple equal sign is going to check not just if they're both 5, but if they're also both numbers or the same data type, basically. Since it's not, my num is actually, remember when I defined my num, I said it's 5, just 5 number, no quotes around it. So if I'm comparing this, I should get false. Yep. Because my num is 5, but it's not a string. So that third equal sign is checking if it's the same data type. Cool. Any questions? You guys wanna you want me to give you like 5 minutes to play around in the console and try some of this stuff, or should I continue? Because the next thing we're gonna get into is objects. Okay. So let me go back to my previous drawings. I guess I can't go that far back. Oh, well. So I was talking about the different containers for or different data types. Um, so a variable is just a container variable, and you can put different data types in it. You could put string, number, boolean. Those would be primitive data types, but a variable can also hold more than just a simple primitive data. It could hold an object. So an object would be something that's wrapped in curly brackets. So there's different non-primitives, okay, but object is like the most common type. Well, I won't say common, but this represents the word object best, I think. It's something that has properties and um, methods. A property is just property like hair color or height or um, I don't know, age, year. These are all properties that some object might have. Like if this object is supposed to represent a car, for example, my car might have a make, and that would be, let's say, Jeep, and separated with commas are the other properties. So model, say Wrangler, color, black, um, year 2021. So this would be an object. So kind of think of it like the object has its own variables. Like this is an object. It has a variable called make, which is Jeep. It has a variable called model, another one called color, and a year. Okay, so these are called object properties. These are the values of those properties. So a variable can also hold that. Now, that's not a primitive data type anymore. So the other ones, number, string, those are all primitives. This is now an object. It's not a primitive anymore. Another non-primitive would be an array. So maybe you have a shopping list or something, and this would be in a square brackets instead of curly brackets. So this is called an array. Array is just a comma separated list. So if we had a shopping list, we might need milk, butter, sugar, water. Um, so this would be an array. And notice I have to put the quotes around these. Otherwise, if I didn't put quotes, then this would have to be some kind of variable, milk. So I would have to define milk somewhere. I'd have to have somewhere above this would have to have let milk equal I don't know, just milk. Milk equals milk. So maybe we'd call it something else like let drink equal milk. Okay, so you could put variables in an array. That's fine. An array can have variables. Um, so now, basically, instead of writing milk, I said let drink equal milk, and I put drink here. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like me putting this here instead of drink. Um, but yeah, if you don't put quotes around these, then it's gonna assume they're variables. So put a quote if you don't want it to assume it's a variable. It's just that word that you're trying to list in there. So you could put those. It could also be a variable. So this would be a non-primitive. So these are non-primitive data. Um, so let me just write here string. So you know this is sorry, not string. This is an array. And this is your basic object. So here's what's confusing. All non-primitive data can be considered objects. Although officially this is an object, array is just another type of object. And the another type of object might be a function. There's also things like map and um, there's different types of arrays, like named arrays and stuff, but we don't need to worry about those. But anything that's not a primitive, you can consider as an object. Okay, but when I say object most of the time, I'm referring to something like this. It's in the curly brackets. It has properties and they're comma separated. So they're supposed to represent like real world objects, what kind of properties that they might have. Like this would be a car, but you know, maybe you have an object that represents a person. So it might have their name. And we saw that we could have objects inside objects. So this object could have a name, and name could have an object inside that has. So the value of name could be an object that has its own properties, like first, and then last. And this would be comma separated as well. Oops. Anyways, if I type this in VS Code, I don't have to do all that. It'll just do it for me. But yeah, so name could be one of the properties of this object, and that name could have an object as a property. Then we could have like hair color. That would be a string black. So, and oh, this has to be comma separated. So again, so we have an object. The first property inside the object is name. The second one is hair color. They're separated with a comma. Okay, but name happens to be an object as well, and the first property is first, and the second property is last. So and there's no limit to the number of levels of objects inside an object. Also, since we're talking about objects inside objects, arrays can also have arrays in them. So this array could have another array inside. So the array could have an array in it. This would be useful for that's called a two-dimensional or three-dimensional array. I forget, but it can be used to represent like Tetris, basically. If you're like when I was making the Tetris game, I had to use arrays inside arrays because they give you. So let's say if this was an array, this would be an array with three arrays inside of it. Let's say, right? So maybe remember the square bracket represents an array. So we have a array, but inside the array we have more arrays. Ah, we have that one. Why don't I just delete these? I just copy this. There we go. Make this bigger. Oh, here's an array with three arrays inside of it. This could be used to represent like a matrix. Um, be easier if I put numbers in there. But like you could, think of this as row 1, row 2, and row 3. Alright, so if you were gonna represent this in a picture, you might be able to show like a block like this, and you could create your Tetris pieces out of that. That's exactly what I did to create the Tetris game. You have all your possible pieces you could fit in there. So in the Tetris game, if I had an array like this, maybe I would put, instead of blocks, let's just put numbers in here so it makes more sense. 1, 0, 0. I don't know what this is gonna look like. 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. So let's say each one is gonna be red, and then the zeros are black. So then I would get, for the first row, I would get red 0, 0, red 0, 0, red 0, 0. So this would give me this shape, right? If I tried to represent maybe the L shape in Tetris, then I would probably need 0, 1, 0. Actually, no, I would need 1, 1, 0, and then 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. So basically that would give me switch these around. Right, because 110, 110, 010, 010, 010. So you could have a matrix to represent, like if you were gonna build a shape. Anyway, I'm just I don't know why I went off on that, but I just wanted to show you what you might use a matrix like that for. Array inside an array, what it might be useful for. Of course, you could use it for other more simple things, but you could also use it to create your shapes in Tetris. Um, so let's look at objects in detail in our notes. So all non-primitives are objects. They are assigned with var, let, or const, the same as primitives, but their values can be numerous other variables. Variables in objects are called properties. Each property is stored as a key value pair. So make is a property, model is a property, color is a property, year is a property. They're stored as key value pairs. So there's the key value, key value, key value. Okay. The key's value is separated by a colon. So you put a colon, the two dots between the key and the value. The key is not in quotes, except if you're talking about JSON data. Remember JavaScript object notation. So it's a type of it's a way to store data, JSON data, um, like an alternative to storing data in like an Excel table or in what do you call it, XML format. So common ways to store data when you're talking about web are, well, right now JSON is probably the most popular way to do it, JavaScript object notation. But the other way is to use XML. Remember I said from the previous class, if you remember, XML is another markup language, just like HTML. Except in HTML you have your pre-existing tags like the h2 tag or the div tag. So they're already predefined. In XML, you could make up your own tags. So in a way, you could store your own data like that. Like you can say, like student. So this is XML data, how it's stored. So you have a student, and then that's the outside tags for student that represents the student. But that student could have properties inside of it, like student ID. Okay, and the student's ID might be, I don't know, some random number. The student might have like a name. Might have a first name. And the last name. Anyway, so you could store data like that. This would be XML data. So if you're gonna store data in XML, that's what it would look like. And you'll see still used. XML is a way to store data. But another way more popular now is JSON data, JavaScript object notation, where you have objects to represent your data with different properties. So basically, Let me copy this over. So this same data, student with an ID and a name and a first name, this could all be written in JSON. You just have student. Well, you'd have to first, you'd say like let student equal this, and then you'd have to assign this. But basically, this is the student. But we're not gonna have a student outside property, but we will have an ID in there. Okay, you'll have a name. And if you're gonna write it like this, where there's name and then there's first and maybe um last, let me just put last in there. John Doe. It's XML, and then as JavaScript object notation, first of all, you have to put quotes around. So in JSON, you do put quotes around the key, but this is, when you save the file as .json, then it's gonna expect quotes around these. But if it's a .js file and you're talking about just regular objects in JavaScript, we don't put the quotes. So that's the only difference that I can think of. Actually there's other differences, but it's one of the main differences between JSON data and actual JavaScript objects. Okay, so name could have the first, last. Again, if this was JSON, then we put quotes around these. If it's just an object in JavaScript, we don't put the quotes. Alright, so this and this are two different ways to store the same data. Okay, XML, JSON. It's a way to store data. So if you go to create a database, like MongoDB is a type of database that stores in JSON format. Let me see if I could log in, see if I have any databases. Why is it sign in? So we have some databases here. There's a cluster, and inside that cluster I have, so they all have they have weird names for their collection of databases. Here they call it cluster. Where's my, this looks different. I haven't opened this in a while. I just want to go to my databases. There we go. Okay, so here's a fake product database that I have, and you can see here the data. It's got keys and values, key value pairs. Now the way it's represented here doesn't look like JSON data, but if I was to try to get this data through JavaScript, it would return a JSON object. So these key value pairs would come in JSON format. I thought I would show it in JSON format, but maybe I could, I don't know, copy it or something. anyways, the sample API that I showed you is the same thing. So like here, let's look at coffee. Looked at Futurama last time. Let's look at the coffee now. You can see here. Let me just click on this thing here. You can see here it's an array with a bunch of objects in it. So you can see here the key has quotes around it. The value has quotes. So we know it's JSON data because it has quotes around the key. And here it looks messy, but if I was to copy that, paste it into VS Code in a JSON file, let's call it coffee.json. Paste it in here, save it, and Prettier should do its thing and make that look nicer for me. So this messy thing now looks like this, more easier to understand. We have an array, right? The square bracket represents an array. Inside it, we have an object, curly bracket. It's JSON data. This is a JSON file, .json. So it's going to be stored with the key value. We get the title, black. Description, black coffee is as simple as it gets, blah, blah, blah. Ingredients is an array and just has one thing in there, coffee. ID is 1. Latte, next title. Oops. This one has its own description, its own ingredients. This time still an array, but we have a couple more ingredients in there. Or just one more ingredient. Espresso and steamed milk. ID is 2. Separated with a comma is the next item in the array. So it's an array full of these objects, different coffees. And so it's stored in JSON format. So I don't know where you would find data stored as XML, but like I said, now it's more common to see data stored in JSON format. So just like this, right? This is exactly what this is. It's JSON data, except it's a list instead of just a single object. They give us a list because, of course, you're not just going to have one object in there stored. You're going to have multiple objects. So the first one would be John Doe in the array, and then the second one would be some other person, right? So that's the same thing that we're getting here. Does that make sense, you guys? Why we might need to know what the JSON object is? Just this is all really important because you could do a lot. Like, all data right now that you can fetch from the internet is going to come to you as JSON format in this JavaScript object notation with the keys. So again, JavaScript objects are JSON data is stored as JavaScript objects. The difference is they put quotes around the keys. So yeah, there's when you become a programmer and you're building an app or something, maybe a phone app. A lot of times you're gonna need some data from a big company like Google that collected the data for you, right? You're not gonna go out and try to find all the addresses and the what do you call it, the coordinates, the geographic coordinates for all the addresses. If you wanted to use Google Maps or something and type in an address and it finds it for you, you're going to get that from Google. And then Google is going to provide you some kind of an API. you're gonna like request data from them, they're gonna send it back to you in that JSON format, and then you're gonna have to use that in your page somehow. Or like, I don't know, maybe you have a list of books, you have a book database somewhere that you can get the information about the books. But it's all gonna come in JSON format, just like this. So again, they're key value pairs. They're separated with commas. Um, they're wrapped in curly braces. Keys don't need to be wrapped in quotes unless we're talking about JSON, okay? Values that are strings must be wrapped in quotes. So if Honda is a string, make sure it's wrapped in quotes, or else it's gonna think Honda is a variable you're referring to instead of just a string Honda. um, of course, if it's a number, it doesn't need uh, quotes around it because it's a number. Objects 2. You can access a property with a dot or square brackets. So there's two different ways to access the properties of an object. You could use dot notation or square brackets. Important difference, when you use a dot, of course, you just put dot and then the name of the property, or the key, right? Key property, same thing. The difference between doing it with the dot notation and the square bracket notation is, if you're doing it with the square brackets, then you need to put quotes around your key. The reason is because you might put a variable here. So if you're gonna refer to like a variable, this is kind of confusing. Let me just do an example here. So let's make an object first. I'm gonna say let car equal make Honda model wait, I forgot to put quotes. Make Honda model Civic year 2001. So we have our object I just created. If I type car, we get the object. It's got make Honda model Civic year 2001. Click the little arrow. It'll show you the different properties on different lines. And then prototype is like, I don't know how to explain prototype. Basically, like, where does where does this inherit from? The object of, I don't know. Just forget prototype. Ignore that. But we need to access properties of this object. So let's say we want to know what's the make of the first car that we have here. We can say car.make. It'll give us Honda. If we use object notation, we say car square brackets, and then in quotes we put make. Honda. So either car.make or car square brackets and then in quotes make. If you don't put quotes, it's going to think make is a variable. I say car make, we're going to get an error. Make. I don't know why it keeps auto-correcting. I don't want you to auto-correct. Just stop. Press enter. So we get an error. Make is not defined because it's thinking this is a variable. If I said, um, like for example, let key equal make, then I could say car key without the quotes. Now there is a variable called key, and the value of that is make. And if I say car key, then it should be the same as typing in car make, and I get the same. I get the property out of it that I wanted. So that's why square brackets, you have to put quotes around the property unless it's actually a variable. You have to put quotes around it. If you're using dot notation, you don't put quotes around it. But with dot notation, you can't say you can't use variables there. It's just the property itself. Does that make sense? I'm getting really deep into some of the details right now, but you know it's important because you might have issues later, and you'll remember these little details and might make it help you make sense of things. Um, so that's objects. There's another little thing here. It's also confusing detail. You don't really need to know too much, but primitives, unlike primitives, objects are not compared by value. So if you have two primitives, let's show it here, I guess. Say let person1 equal Bob, let person2 also equal Bob. They're both Bob. If we check if person1 is equal to person2, we get true. But if let car1 equal make Honda, we're just gonna have one property in there, which will be the make. Let's not forget to put it in quotes, just to keep this simple. Let car2 also equal make Honda. So same exact thing, except one's car1, one's car2. And if we compare car1, check if it's equal to car2, we get false. So it's going to be a little bit different. So if it's a primitive, like just a string, and they both have the same value, you compare them, you're going to get true. But if they're objects, and you compare them, even though they're the same exact properties and values, you're going to get false. Because unlike primitives, objects are not compared by value. So what are they compared by if they're not compared by value? The location in your computer's memory. So all variables take up some point of memory in your computer. So when you have objects and you're comparing them, it's checking if you're talking about the same location in memory, but you're not. When you create two objects, they take up different parts of your computer memory. That's kind of stuff that I'm not really too knowledgeable about, like how computer memory works exactly. But that's all I know about that. Why they don't come out to be the same when you compare them. So JavaScript arrays are special objects that store values and automatically assign index numbers as their keys. So I showed you arrays, but we haven't really looked at how to access different values in an array. We use their index. An index is just a number, so the first, second, third, except it starts counting from 0. So the first item in the array is going to be represented with the index of 0. So you count from 0. And Yeah, we'll look at some examples, but each value in the array has index number starting with 0. The index number is a key that is automatically assigned. So think of the index as the key, but you don't access it with dot notation. You can only access it with the square brackets. Values are accessed by index numbers enclosed in brackets. So in the above example, this example here, array 1, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Array 1, square bracket 0. So the key 0 or the index 0 represents the first item in there, which is 10. So if we have the index of 1, then that's talking about the second object actually, because we're starting from 0. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4. You can create an empty array and assign values later. So you can always, same as objects and other variables, you can always make something empty and then add stuff to it later. This is unlike some other programming languages, won't let you do this. I think Java and C# don't let you do this, because when you define like an array, I think you have to, in those languages, you have to specify how many objects you have in there. So if you define it as something with 0 objects in there, so you can't really add it later. But again, I don't know too much about Java and C#, but from what I remember, JavaScript gives you a little bit more freedom when it comes to that. You can always make something empty and add stuff to it later. Arrays can also be created using the new keyword. I don't know why you would do this. There might be situations where you might do this, but you can create a new array with new array and then in parentheses, comma separated values you can enter in there, and it'll create an array for you. Arrays have built-in properties and methods that they inherit from the array prototype. So again, method is a function, but it's inside an object. Now we haven't talked about objects, functions yet, so don't worry about the methods yet. We'll slowly get into it. Just want to make sure you guys understand what I've covered so far. Okay, so we've got primitive data, which is strings and numbers, and then we have non-primitives, which are objects, which have keys and value pairs. And um, da, da, da. And their objects can have other objects inside them, and arrays can have other arrays inside them. Arrays can also have objects inside them. That's what the sample data had that we found from online about coffee. It's an array and it has objects inside of it. Okay, and some of the objects inside of the array have arrays inside. So you can see you could put objects inside arrays and objects inside objects and arrays inside arrays and arrays inside objects. So that's why they're called non-primitive. They're not primitive because they can have so much different data inside them. Okay, I want to give you guys a chance to try out objects with properties. Let me think of what we could do as an exercise. To get used to We'll start with objects, and then I'll show you how to do arrays, access the different elements inside an array. Um, okay, how about let's have a create an array of your favorite top three animals. Is that a good one, or should I? I'll leave it up to you. Just make an array. Sorry, an object. Sorry, make an array. I'm gonna make an array, and it's gonna have objects inside of it. So I'm gonna say let my favorite whatever. Let's say favorite movies equals. It's an array because it's gonna be more than one movie inside. Also, by the way, if you're typing in the JavaScript, I mean the Chrome console or whatever browser you're in, if you're in the console and you want to press enter to go to the next line and not actually execute, when I pressed enter, it says undefined. But what I want to do is, let me refresh. What I want to do is break this open and go to the next line. And the way I do that, instead of actually like executing this code, instead of pressing enter, press shift enter, and it will go down to the next line instead of like submitting that basically. So shift enter to go to the next line. It's also how you do line breaks in like InDesign, some other word processing. I think instead of starting a new paragraph, you're just going to the next line without starting a new paragraph with shift enter. But anyways, shift enter if you want to do that and not actually execute and have it say undefined and execute the code. Okay, so we're gonna create an array. Let's say my top 10 movies equals an array. Okay, and the first object inside the array will be, it's an object, so it's in curly braces. Let me zoom in on that. The first property will be name. What's the name of this movie? Jurassic Park. Shift enter to go to the next line without executing it. It's kind of hard to remember. This is why it's easier to just type it in like VS Code, so you don't have to worry about that. So let my top 10 movies equals name Jurassic Park. Release date. Say 1995. Pretty sure it's 1995. And then you could have all kinds of data for it. Director, was it Steven Spielberg? Yeah, of course it was Steven. Genre. What is it? Science fiction. Anyways, what other data? What other things you can think of? You could put that would be the first movie. So it's my top 10 movies. So that's number one, comma. Say top five. I don't feel like listing 10 movies. comma, next movie, I don't know, Home Alone, name, Home Alone. When was that? 1993, I'm guessing. Jurassic Park. Oh no, it was 19. Wow, that was 1993. Home Alone. That was 1990. I didn't know it was that old. Um. Anyways, so you would director, genre, comma separated. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Top 5 movies. So we got 5 of them, and they all have different. Well, no, they're just copies of Home Alone right now, but you get the idea. Let's make this last one different. Um, Lost Boys. This was probably something like 87. I don't know. I don't know the director or the genre. Horror, I guess. It's vampires. I don't know. Um, so let my top 5 movies equal that. Right now, if I open this with live server, inspect, get the console, and we type in my top 5 movies, we see there's an array with 5 things in there, or a length of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can open it up and we can see at index 0 is Jurassic Park, 1, 2, and 3 are Home Alone, 4 is Lost Boys. Lost Boys. Um, and then if you wanted to access individual properties of these, here's where we get into where did this go? Where'd my notes go? There it is. So when you have arrays and you wanna access an array property, again you use square brackets and then write the name of the index or the number of the index. So in this case, in top 5 movies, if I want to get the name of the first movie, I would say my top 5 movies dot well, not dot, square bracket 0 to get the first one. Remember, there's 5 things in there. If I just want to get the first one of these 5, it's at index 0. So my top 5 movies, square bracket 0, gives me the first object in there, which is Jurassic Park. Give me all the details. 1993, Steven Spielberg. If I type in my top 5 movies 0, so we're gonna get the first object inside the array, but I want to get just the name of the movie, then I'll type dot name and we get Jurassic Park. I could also use square bracket notation to get the name. I just have to type it like this, and Same thing. So my top 5 movies, index 0. So the first thing in there, remember we have an array, square bracket, square bracket. Inside that we have 5 things separated with commas. The first one is at index 0 because we will always start from 0. And if I want to get the name of that first one, then I would say my top 5 movies, 0 dot name. My top 5 movies, 0 dot name gives me the first one. Right. If I want to see my top 5 movies, the last one, or number 4, remember, even though there's 5 of them, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, we're starting to count from 0. So the first one is index 0, and then the last one, instead of being at index 5, is actually at index 4, since we're counting from 0. So if I want to get Lost Boys, it would be my top 5 movies, index 4 dot name. So, oh, it's already 8:10. Let's take a break. Okay, let's take a break, but I want you guys to try to create an array full of objects representing your favorite whatever. You can put your favorite movies or top 5 this or that. It's up to you. Just give me an array with um, with a few objects inside of it, just like this. But let's take a break first. So I'll be back 8:30. Let me pause the recording. All right, and we're back. So yeah, so you have that first assignment, which is the story, but let's create a second thing to work on over the weekend and the lab day. So this one, I'll make this also due Friday, so just work on these 2 things tomorrow. Just create a list of top 5 movies. I shouldn't say list, I should say array of top 5 movies, and make each movie an object. Actually, it doesn't have to be top 5 movies, it could be whatever you want, as long as it's stored as object inside an array. So create an array create an array filled with objects. Each object should have key value pairs. Key value. I should just put that in curly braces so it's not confusing. Separated commas. The array can represent a list of top 5 movies I don't know, animals, or whatever else you can think of. That can be represented with different properties. Okay, so you're gonna have to create that in. I should have not written over the story. So let me copy this and Control Z and go back to before I destroyed this. Okay, we'll keep this story as it is. So that's my story. Let's create another file for list of objects.js. I'll paste this in here. So currently we've got the script connected to my story. Let's instead connect it to list of objects.js. So now if I open this and we look at the console and type my top 5 movies, we can see it. Now, for now, that's all you're gonna do. But remember, really useful thing you can do with JavaScript is if you get some data like that. Imagine this list of top 5 movies. Maybe it's a list of like 1,000 movies. They all have name, release date, director, genre. Maybe you have an image URL and then links to an actual image, like let's say Jurassic Park. Let's go to Wikipedia and let's look at the image here and just copy that URL for the image. Am I looking at the image URL? Let's say open a new tab. There we go. Let's just take this here, copy that. Now we have an image URL for that movie. And then let's get one for Home Alone. Home Alone. There's our image here. Open image in a new tab. And copy this. And add an image URL for this one. Paste that in there. And the other ones, let's just put image URL and just blank because I don't feel like adding all of these. Copy paste these in here. We'll do one for Lost Boys too since we have that there. Let's go to Wikipedia, grab this, open image in a new tab, grab that URL and paste it here. Okay, so now we have a name for a movie, we have a release date, we have a director, we have the genre, we have image URL. See, since I have this page open, let me get the director Joel Shoemaker. Okay. Who's the director of Home Alone? I should directed by Chris Columbus. Okay. So we have this data, and imagine this is some kind of a database someone has saved. Because people do this, they collect information and they store it in a database, and a lot of them make it available to the public. And a lot of times it's very useful information, or it's useful for whatever project you're working on. So maybe you're building a website full of movies, and you need to have a collection. Obviously, it's not possible for one person to go find every movie and every director and every image URL for the movie and the genre. So a lot of times this data already exists somewhere out there. So this could be that data. We're getting it from somewhere, except there's only 5 here, but imagine there's 5,000. And we can, there's ways to fetch the data, get that data from the internet and bring it to your website. But that's a little complicated. But let's skip that part and say we already got that data. We have it here. It's already available as my top 5 movies. It's already stored in that variable. Okay, but if we were getting it from online, you would go online, you would um, fetch it, and then save it as this. And it's not too complicated. Eventually, we'll learn that, but um, you get the information, you store it in a variable, then you can do stuff with it. Like, for example, this is we have it inside this HTML file. We have all this data for these movies, right? It's all stored as my top 5 movies. So we can say, and this is um, going into the next section here, array methods. So an array is something in JavaScript that has a lot of built-in methods for it, built-in functions. Okay, so remember, alert is a built-in function for the console. So the console has alert, and all functions are written like this. Or they're executed this way. You call a function like this. You write the name of the function, and then the parentheses is used to call it. If I just type alert, press enter, it's just gonna show me like this is a function. There's some native code in there. But if I type alert with the parentheses, I press enter, we get an alert here. I changed this to be a separate window. Let me change it back. How do I change it back? Here we go. Okay, so let's bring it back here. Let's go to the console. Let me type in alert again. You can see we get an alert. We type alert with some kind of message inside. Make sure it's a string. We get alert with whatever message we put in there. So alert is a built-in function for the console. Now when we have arrays, so we have this array, and I'm just going to put some random fruit names in there. Apple, banana, orange, in quotes. So we have an array. So this array that I have here, apple, banana, orange, doesn't matter what array it is. All arrays have these built-in functions that you can use for them. So let me zoom out here. Okay, so the first one, concat. Merge two or more arrays and returns a new array. So that's if you want to just join two arrays together. You could say array1 or concat array1 and then comma array2. It'll put them together. So we have an array here. Let array, I should call it array1. Let me refresh the page, clear that out. Let's say let array1 equal apple, banana, orange. Let array2 equal strawberry and watermelon. Okay, so now we have two arrays. Array1, apple, banana, orange. Array2, strawberry, watermelon. If I say array1 plus array2, if we just use the plus symbol, we could concatenate it that way as well. You can see it puts them together. But you could also say merge two or more arrays. So I think for this one, it's an array method, so that means we have to type the name of the array, array1 dot concat. And I think if I type array2 in here, it should work that way. Yeah, so now I joined them, apple, banana, orange, strawberry, and watermelon. Actually, it did it kind of differently, didn't it? I don't know why. So the third one is strawberry and watermelon. Why is that? Oh, because I put them in the same. I messed up on array2. Said array2 equals strawberry, comma, watermelon, but I forgot to separate these as two different items in there. Okay, that's the correct way to write those. So array1 concat array2. Now we get what I wanted. Apple, banana, orange, strawberry, watermelon. But as you saw, you could just say array1 plus array2, get the same thing pretty much. Actually, no, you don't get the same thing. What you get is a string. This is a full-on string. It's no longer an array. But if you say array1 concat array2, it stays an array. It just joins the two arrays together. So it's not the same. Anyway, so that's just one example of a built-in array method. There's just a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll tell you the most common ones. Definitely, you might use filter if you're trying to filter through the array. I think I showed you filter the other day. Find index will find the index of some value that you enter in there. For each is good for looping through the array and doing something for each item in the array. We'll actually use this right now. Let's see. Pop is really useful. Pop just gets rid of the last item in the array. Push will add something to the beginning of an array. Or sorry, add one or more elements to the end of an array. If you want to add it to the beginning of the array instead of using push, you can use unshift. Adds element to the beginning of an array. So unshift and push kind of do the same thing, except one adds the element to the end of the array, the other one adds it to the beginning of the array. And then shift will do the opposite of pop. Pop removes the last element, shift removes the first element. So these are kind of simple to use. Say we have say let my nums equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so my nums, I put nums is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I say nums dot push, and I push 6 to it, it shows me the 6. First of all, it returns that. But now if I type nums, now we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So push, nums push 6 added 6 to the end of the array. So it's no longer 1 through 5, it's now 1 through 6. So these are built-in array methods, right? There's a bunch of them. They're not all easy to use, figure out, like pop and push. Those are pretty simple. You just type nums and then let's say pop. And pop, remember, removes the last thing in there. So if I type nums now, it's back to 1 through 5. No more 6 in there. If I say nums pop again, I type nums, you can see now it's 1 through 4. Again, got rid of the last one because I said pop. But the one that we're going to use for this here, because we have a bunch of things in here. Now, it's not going to be useful for me to get rid of the last one using pop. I might use push to add something to the end of this. Then it wouldn't be top 5 anymore, it would be top 6. But what we really want to do is, we have all this information, we got this from somewhere. We say we fetched it from the internet. Someone had a database full of movies, and we grabbed all of them. And we just want to, we have a web page, and we want to show each movie on the page. And we want to style it, like maybe put the name inside an H2, put the release date in a H3, the director, just put that maybe in a H4, and then maybe the genre, other, I don't know actually, maybe put these all inside a paragraph, or all make them all just paragraphs with different styling around them. An image URL, maybe you want this to be the source attribute for an image, right? So yeah, you have the information, you want to do stuff with it, now you can. So down here, after the object, my top 5 movies, I could say my top 5 movies dot for each. This is useful, again, it's for looping through the array. For each is one of these built-in methods that's really useful. It says calls a function once for each array element. Now, unfortunately, we didn't cover functions yet, so this part might be confusing, but I'm going to do something for each of the array elements. I'm going to say for each array element, I'm going to do this function. So this is basically how you write an arrow function, parentheses, draw an arrow with the equal and the greater than sign, and then inside here is your code block. So inside here would be the code, basically the stuff that you want to happen. So this is, let me just show you this by itself. This is a function. You could also write a function. The alternate way to write a function is function, and do it this way. You could write a function like this, or you could write a function like this. There's 2 different ways to write the function. There's slight differences, but they're not really anything to worry about. I'll let you know about those later when we learn more about these. But basically, this is the function, and inside the curly brackets, that's the function body. Like, what do you want the function to do? Maybe you want it to alert something. Hello. So if this, oh, by the way, it needs a name. Function, say something. So function say something will alert hello. And then this could be another function. Let's say something else equal. And see, it's written a little bit differently, right? When we define it like this, we could just say function say something, and we define the function, and then it'll do this. If we use arrow functions, we kind of have to assign it to a variable. So we say let say something else equal that, or var say something else equals that. We could use let and var interchangeably, but we're creating a variable, and the value of that variable is going to be this function. And alert something else. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this for a second just to cover these two. So we have two functions created. One is say something, the other one is say something else. One will alert hello, the other one will alert something else. And there's just two different ways to write functions. This is the newer way to do it. This is the older way to do it. And there's some small differences, but we'll talk about those later. So if I open this and inspect, now we've created those functions, called them say something, right? So if I type say something and just press enter, you're going to see it's showing me a function. It's basically showing me what the function looks like. It says say something. I don't know why it keeps opening that. Alert hello. So it's basically showing me what I wrote in here, because all I did is type the name of that variable, say something. But if I say something followed by parentheses and I press enter, you can see the alert hello. So now instead of showing me the function, it actually executes what's inside the body, which is alert hello. If I say something else, press enter, we say something else. If I say something else without the parentheses, then it's just going to show me that function that I wrote. Okay, so adding the parentheses after executes the function, calls what's inside the body. Again, inside the curly brackets of the function, that's the body of the function. That's where you execute the code, or that's the code that's going to execute. So, knowing that, if I want to do something for each of these, let me first write one simple one just for one of them. Let's say function alert name of director Okay, so just alert name of director, let's say. I'm just giving it a random name. And what I want this to do is I want it to give me maybe the director's name of the first movie in my top 5 movies. So I want it to say my top 5 movies, 0, so the first of those top 5, dot director. I want that information, except I can't just type it like this. I need to either return that. Returning will basically just show you. It will return in the console. Here, let me show you what return does. So I wrote function alert name of director, and I just said return my top 5 movies. First one in there, so 0 index dot director. So it's going to give me the director of the first item inside my top 5 movies. And the first item is this object, so it's going to give me the director of that. Okay, so I'm going to save this, go to my console, and what do I call alert name of director, right? So parentheses, and I press enter, we see Steven Spielberg. So this is what a return does. It just returns it to the console. You know how if I type let x equal 1, this is a return. So we get undefined because when I assign a function or assign a value to a variable, that also returns or tries to return something, but there's nothing there to return, so it just says undefined. In this case, when I called this function, it returned Steven Spielberg. Now, if I said instead of return, I could have said console.log. So now instead of returning, I'm saying console log, alert name of director. See, it's slightly different. Now it's just writing Steven Spielberg, where before it was in red and it was in quotes. Here, I could actually do both. I could console log and I can return. Also, when you're returning, it's okay to put it in parentheses, but you don't have to. And also, when you return something in a function, it ends the function, so you can't do anything else after returning. So this is console log, this is return. Return is useful if you want to do something with that information afterwards. So, like, let's say you want to save the result of this function, you could do that if you return something from it. This is what return is for. So if I say let director equal alert name of director, now if I type director, we can see I saved. Director is now a variable with the value of Steven Spielberg. If I didn't return it though, then I wouldn't be able to do that. If I'm just console logging, there's nothing coming out of there. So if I try to say let director, let me refresh the page, make sure it's all cleared. Let director equal alert name of director. This time, remember, I'm not returning anything. I'm just console logging. So there's nothing being returned by the function. So there's no data being returned by it. It's doing something, but it's not returning any data. So I can't really do this anymore. So if I press enter and I type director, you see it's undefined. Okay, because I tried to assign the result of this function to director variable, but there was no result from it. It console logged something, but it didn't return data. So there was no data to assign to this. That's why we still get undefined. So director is undefined. So that's what the return is for. This is something that it took me a while to understand, but I'm explaining it to you now because it's really important. Returning gives you something that you can work with out of the function. So also, whenever you noticed, whenever I did pop, it removes the last element of the array and returns that element. See that? It returns that element. So it removes something, but it also returns it. So if I say let my array equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can say let number that was removed equal my array dot pop. Okay, so number that was removed, I press enter, we can see 5. So the number that was removed is 5. So if we type my array, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 5 was removed from it. And it got returned after I did the pop, because pop removes the last element and returns that element. I was able to store that element as number that was removed. So number that removed saved that 5. All right, so now, knowing all of that, maybe now we can talk about for each. So for each will call a function once for each array element. So here I was just working with the first element, my top 5 movies, the first element, so index 0 dot director. That's the first thing in that array. But if I wanted to do something with every single object in here, might be 1,000 of them, then I can say my top 5 movies dot for each, and then put a function inside that. So I'm putting a function inside the function's argument. So for each, there's a function inside there. Okay, so so if I do an alert, alert takes in whatever you want to alert, so hello. So unlike alert, which is a function that just returns whatever you typed inside there, for each is a little bit different. You don't just type in a simple string inside there. No, instead, a whole other function goes inside there. Okay, so this is a whole function, and this is the function body. We have to add some stuff inside that function. So when you do this, what it's gonna need is, so you put this function in there. So I'm basically trying to loop through. Let's say I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say that's my array. Let my array equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure that's in square brackets to show that it's an array. So I would have to say my array dot for each. Now what this is gonna do, my array dot for each, it's gonna for each array some array item. So the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5. For each of those, I can do something. Okay, so this function will do something for me. Now, when we put this function inside there, inside these parentheses, you could put a variable to represent each of these. So this x can represent the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5. It'll represent each of them, because for each is gonna go through all of them. So every time it goes through them, this x is gonna represent each one. Okay, and then inside here, we can do something with that. So since the x represents each of those, I can say console.log x, right? So if I do that, then it's going to console log each of these. Or I can say console.log the number is plus x. If we just like, we want to console log, the number is 1, the number is 2, the number is 3, the number is 4, the number is 5. So if I do this, my array dot for each, and I put a x to represent each of these, I can say console log, the number is plus x. And this x will represent the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5. So we'll get the number is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let me show you that real quick. Let my noms equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My noms dot for each. Uh-oh, where did it go? My noms dot for each. I want this to go away. My nums dot for each. Okay, so here I could write x, or I could say num, to represent each of the numbers. So what do I want to do with each of those numbers? I want to console.log the number is plus num. So in this case, instead of x, I put num. It doesn't matter. You could put whatever you want there. Just make sure you use that same variable to represent the number. So if I now press enter, we get the number is 1, the number is 2, the number is 3, the number is 4, the number is 5. So it's doing something for each of the items inside that array. My nums, my array, my nums. There we go. Okay, so I'm hoping that's making sense. I'm trying to break it down and explain each of these in as many different ways as I can. So now, again, for each is going to go through each of these. So instead of just numbers 1 through 5, it's actually these objects. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's an object for Jurassic Park with the name, release date, genre. Another object for Home Alone. Another object, another object, another object. So a bunch of objects instead of numbers. So for each of these, call it obj or movie, right? This is just to represent each of these objects. It's just a variable to represent them, because we're going to loop through each of them, and we need to give each of them, we need to represent them with something so we could do something with them. So for each movie, I want to console.log movie dot director, right? So it's going through each of the movies. It's going to check the first one and give me this movie's dot director, and then it's going to look at the next movie and give me that movie dot director. It's going to console log each of these. And a couple of these are blank, so we're going to see some blanks. So we should basically see 3 of them when I do this. So I save this, and we can see here we got, maybe zoom out, Steven Spielberg, Chris Columbus, Joel Shoemaker, and then there's a couple blank ones in there. Let's just put unknown. It's not unknown. These are all Home Alone, so let's just put Chris Columbus. Check it again. We can see it's Steven Spielberg, and then 3 Chris Columbuses, and then Joel Shoemaker. So it's giving me each of the director names. Now, something more useful than just console logging each of them might be to actually grab each of those and maybe put it in the page somewhere. Now, this is all stuff that we haven't gotten into yet, but I mentioned in JavaScript, you can manipulate HTML and CSS. So there's something called the document object model, or DOM. Basically, everything in HTML is represented as an object um, with properties and some built-in functions or methods. Um, so one of the things you can do in JavaScript with HTML is you could create elements. The way you create an element in JavaScript is by saying document dot create element. Simple. Well, it's not done yet. So document dot create element. Okay, that's a built-in function for the document. So just like alert is a built-in thing you can do in the console. Just like my top 5 movies is an array, and arrays have the for each built into them. The document has create element built into it. So with the create element, all you need to do is say which element you want to create. And I want to make sure you put it in quotes, because otherwise it's going to think you're referring to a variable. So maybe I want to create a paragraph. Okay. But okay, we created a document, but what do we want to do with that? We want to save it. So we say let p equal document.create element p. Okay, or paragraph. You call it whatever you want. Okay, I'll just call it p to keep it simple. Let p equal document.create element p. So this will represent the paragraph element that gets created. Okay, so what I'm doing so far for each of the movies is going to happen every time for each movie. So for each movie, I'm going to create a paragraph element. Then I'm going to say p.inner text equals movie dot name. So it's going to put inside the paragraph, it's going to put the text of the movie name. So if the movie name is Lost Boys, then inside the paragraph, it's basically going to create a paragraph element and put the name of the movie inside of it. So we're creating the paragraph element, we're putting the name of the movie inside, and then last thing we want to do is add that into the page. So document.body.append child. So here's another thing, document.body. This is how you get to the body element of the HTML. So, and append child is used for if you created an element. This is only for elements that you create. They become a child of the body. So you append means just add it inside. So to the body, we're adding that paragraph element that I created, that I put the movie name inside of. So append child p. So that p that I created and stuck the name of the movie inside, I'm appending that to the body, or adding it inside the body. So if I save that and we take a look, we can see here Jurassic Park, Home Alone, Home Alone, Home Alone, Lost Boys. So I put all of them inside there. So you could see what you could do with this. You could continue doing more to these. Like I could say p.style dot color equals I don't know, green. And I could start adding styles to it. So I'm changing the CSS color property to green. So now they're green. Right, like say p.style.font family. So some of the things you have to write a little bit different. Like in HTML or in CSS, you would say font family like this, font dash family, but there is no dashes in variables or in variable names. So you have to put camel case. So just like background color. So in here it's background color camel case. In CSS it would just be background dash color. Since we can't do dashes in here because that's actually a symbol that does something, subtraction, and it wouldn't be able to be used here. So it's some things are changed. So it's background color instead. Anyways, p.style.font family equals, let's say, Arial. And save that. Now the font changed to Arial. So you can see how this for each and how arrays full of objects can be useful, what kind of things you can do with them. Okay. Any questions on all of this? And for your first two assignments, don't worry, we're doing some simple stuff. You're just going to create an array of objects. And then maybe we should display some of the information. So maybe I'm not going to make you loop through, but should I ask you to add this to the page somehow? Or should we keep it just simple as that? Just create it, and thing is, it's going to be harder to check your work. I'm going to have to open your file console, open the console, and then look in there to see if it works or not. So I would say just we'll add a little bit of code to add your movies or whatever data that you collected. We'll add it to the page somehow. So pretty much what I showed you here with the for each. But let's not do the for each yet. Keep it simple. I'll just say list a property of the first and last items of your array, or say display a property of the first and last items of your array in the HTML page with the following code. So your array 0, or actually this is going to be difficult to. I'm trying to avoid using the child append child thing. I want to do it simple like we did the other one. Just document.body.inner text equals. So we'll say let first and last equal your array 0 dot some property plus your array for dot some property. Let's do a plus comma. Let's put a comma between them. So let first and last equal your array 0 dot some property plus comma plus your array 4 dot some property. 4 or in this example I used 4 as the index, assuming there are only 5 items in the array. Index 4 would be the last item. Let me put that in italic. Anyways, I'm expecting you guys will ask me a lot of questions tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. Okay. This could be confusing, but I'm sure you can do it. So your first assignment was the short story. Create a few variables for text that will be repeated throughout your story. These variables might be used to store things like the character's name, the setting of the story, or other character names, numbers, etc. So you're going to write a short story and concatenate the variables into the story with the plus symbol. Bonus if you use, let's add this in here. Bonus, use template strings. Anyways, you don't have to, but you can do that. Instead of concatenating with a symbol. So if you can remember how to use template literals like I did here, I'm no longer using the plus to concatenate. Now I switched to backticks for template literal format or template strings. Forget what it's called. So instead of plus signs, I just put the variable name inside curly brackets $sign. Okay, so that's your first thing. You're just gonna write a short story and just have a couple variables that you use throughout the story, and then document.body.inner text equals story should add the story to your document. Okay, that's the first project. And then the second project is create some list of objects like I did here with different different properties and values. And then you don't need to do the for each. Let me just comment that out. So instead of doing the for each, I just want you to display the first and the last thing on the page. So the first and the last would be this one and this one. So we can say let first and last equal, what do I call this again? My top 5 movies equal my top 5 movies 0 dot name dot name plus a comma, maybe put a space between, actually just a space after the comma, plus my top 5 movies 4 dot name. So again, I'm putting 4 because there's 5 things in here, and the first one is index 0, the second one is index 1, index 2, index 3, the last one is index 4. Another way to write it is by using the length property of the array. I don't know if this is mentioned here. No, these are all methods, not properties. Anyways, arrays have a property of length as well. So if you say let my array equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you type my array dot length. My array dot length will give you the length of your array. So it's telling me 5. So if you want to get the last item in your array, you could say my array dot length minus 1 gives me 5. So it's my array dot length minus 1 because the length is 5 and the index of the last item is 4, so we need 5 minus 1. That's why I'm saying my array dot length minus 1. This way you could, doesn't matter how many things you have in the array, my array dot length minus 1 will always give you the last item in the array. I should mention that here as well. You can use your array dot length minus 1 to get the last item regardless of items in the array. Save that. Okay, so the next thing we'll get into after these built-in array methods are functions and then conditional statements. Like I've already explained functions a little bit. Since I've explained it and since we have time, and since no one's asking any questions, we can talk about functions a little bit more. Functions are objects that can be called to perform a task. They are defined with the function keyword, followed by a name, followed by parentheses, followed by curly braces that will contain the code to be executed. So this is one of those 2 ways I showed you. You write function, give it a name, parentheses, and then curly brackets, and the curly brackets has the code that's going to be executed. The code in the curly brackets will not execute until the function is called. So you create a function, and it won't do anything until you call say hi somewhere. So you have to write say hi with the parentheses somewhere after you define it or before. If you wrote it like this is one of those differences I was talking about between using it this way and the arrow function. And this is also why I said the order sometimes matters in JavaScript. When you define a function like this, you could actually call say hi before you defined it. So you could say hi up there somewhere and then create the function for say hi. But if you write it the other way with the arrow functions, you can't do that. You have to first define it, and then you can only say hi after you've defined it, not before. That's one little difference, but don't worry about it. Um, the code in the curly brackets will not execute until the function is called, meaning you write the name of the function with the parentheses. That's calling the function. When creating a function, you can optionally require input data to be used inside the function. That's where the parentheses come in. So when you type something inside the parentheses, some functions will will require it or will accept it. It's not all of them need it. Might have a function that doesn't really do anything with any variables, so um, typing in something in there would have no effect. Like for example, let's create another function. Function say hi, alert hi. And if I want to call say hi, I would just say hi like this, and it would call it. If I said say hi banana, this would have no effect because this function, when I define it, it doesn't take anything inside. It doesn't do anything with that. Unlike the for each that I created. Remember, for each has a function inside, and that function does take something in. It takes in a variable in here called movie in this case, and it does something with that. It uses that movie's dot name, right? And it's also representing one of those array elements. But if you have a more simple function like this one, it doesn't really need any information in there. Even if you put it, it's not going to care. There's nothing it can do with that information. But you might write the same function a little bit differently. You might say this function, say this, and then you could represent this with something. Just create word in there so you're not confused. Say this and then some word, and then alert whatever that word is. So in this case, you would have to put something in there. So if I say this, and I just did this, then it's not going to say anything because I didn't put anything in there. So if I say hello, then basically word is just now a variable that's representing what I plug into it. So when I type in hello in here, then word is hello. So if I say alert word, then it's going to alert hello. If I type in bye, then say this is now taking in bye as whatever that data is to represent the word. So it's going to alert bye. Okay, so that's something that functions can do. And also you noticed when I created the for each here, for each is built in for each it's built in for arrays. But this is now, instead of taking in just a simple value like hello or a bye, it's taking in this whole function. So a function can also take in a function as an argument. I can't think of a simple one. Obviously, there's no simple one to write with as an example of that. Like, what could I create here that would take in a whole function? Um, no idea. Anyways, that explains functions a little bit. So the placeholder is called a parameter. So this is called a parameter. The thing that goes inside the parentheses. And the value that replaces the placeholder when calling the function is called the argument. So that's the parameter, and then when I call it and I pass in the word by in there, then by is now the argument. So the argument represents the parameter, or the parameter represents the argument. I don't know which way that makes sense, but they're the same thing. Okay, parameter is when you're defining it, argument is when you're calling it. A function can have many parameters and arguments, so it could have more than one. All right, that's enough. I don't want to get into conditional statements, but well, this would be useful. So equal equal, I kind of explained this already. It checks if something is equal to. With three equal signs, you're checking if it's equal value and equal type. Exclamation equal is not equal. So if you want to check if something is not equal to something, put an exclamation and an equal sign. And then if you want to check if it's not equal value or type, then put two equal signs. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal, less than or equal. So these are all to compare, see if something is true or false. So these give you a boolean. All right, and then we get into if statements. I kind of showed you an if statement yesterday. If something, then do this code. So you write it, kind of looks like a function. You write if and then parentheses, you put the condition between the parentheses, and then you have a block of code that will execute. As long as this is true, this will execute. And I'll save that for next week because give you a different assignment on that one. All right, so it's 9:45, 9:44, but if I wait a little, it'll be 9:45. So let me know if you guys have questions, please. It's not gonna be fun the first few days of learning JavaScript because there's not much you can do with just the basics of it. But I want you to understand the basic stuff, so then we can actually do things that we can build an HTML page, style it and stuff. Kind of almost like how I'm adding these things to the page. Oops, not this one. Let me uncomment this. And then eventually maybe I'll show you how to animate with the HTML canvas. For sure we'll look at that. How to make a ball bounce around. Maybe add gravity to the ball. All stuff that we can do with JavaScript. And I forgot to do this first one here, huh? let first and last equal my top 5 movies 0 plus name plus my top 5 movies 4 plus name. So it's gonna give me the fourth or the fourth index, or not the fourth index, but the item at index 4, which is the fifth item. And then the first one is gonna concatenate them with a comma between them, and then let's add that to the page. Let's do it the simple way. Let me get this out. Let's just say document dot inner text equals first and last. Oh, it's not there. We don't have any error. Oh, document dot body dot inner text. There we go. Jurassic Park, Lost Boys. So those are the first and the last movie names. So you should be able to do that. So you're gonna create an object, a list of objects. Then you're gonna say let first and last equal my top 5 movies 0 dot name to get the first item's name. Maybe it's not name, it's whatever property you chose to put in there. You're gonna concatenate that with a comma. Don't forget to put a space after the comma so there'll be a space after the comma. And then you're gonna add the last item's name. And then once you do that, document.body.innerText equals first and last. Similar to what I asked you to do in the first assignment. Exactly the same. So if you do that much, then that's it. That's all you need to do for those first 2 assignments. Looks like I already got one turned in. Thank you, whoever that is. And we'll check these on Monday, next Monday. So try to get those done on lab day. All right. Any questions? No questions. Let me post the sign out. Let me stop recording.